New Knowledge, which is the Democratic, the Democratic data hustlers who went down to Alabama and ran one of the worst black propaganda campaigns ever to actually depress Republican votes. They said they ran a Russia-style disinformation campaign in their own words. And the New York Times kind of covered up for it until they eventually covered it. But one of the things they did was they took some like lawnmower salesman or something who was running a third-party campaign as a right-winger. They tried to boost him. And so this data firm actually arranged a series of interviews and media for this unknown lawnmower salesman to kind of undercut Judge Roy Moore. And one of the articles that New Knowledge produced was in Mother Jones. It's basically Mother Jones became part of a Russian-style disinformation operation, where another thing they did was, as most of our viewers will know, or like our hardcore base will know, they were involved in the purchase of bots for Roy Moore with Cyrillic names so they could say that Russia was boosting Roy Moore. That's what Mother Jones reported on, that Russia was boosting Roy Moore because this firm bought these bots for Roy Moore's Twitter account. And Mother Jones still has that article up.
By the way, Max, you're skipping the fact that New Knowledge was also contracted by the Senate,
right,
to write the definitive report about Russian social media interference.
Right, about the Internet Research Agency, which was then hyped up in the New York Times.
And both of you forgot to mention that New Knowledge is this grifting group that was created by former U.S. national security state operatives who were working for the NSA and Army intelligence. And then, like many of these people who realize it's a hustle, they can leave the U.S. national security state and make 4 to 5 times as much money if they just go into the private sector and make these fake cybersecurity groups. And they get tons of money now. Like, how much did they get paid for the Senate, from the Senate?
That's
then
a good
there's
question.
Hamilton 68, which is operated under the auspices of the German Marshall Fund, which is funded by NATO and USAID. And this is one of the main groups that the New York Times and all the Scott Shane, this is one of the worst culprits at the New York Times, writing these articles about Russian bots and how they were tricking Americans into like taking a knee at NFL games to divide us. And it was just a gigantic black propaganda campaign. It was a disinformation operation run by spooks and national security state retreads who were just like carpetbagging their way across the states looking for new contracts. And Russiagate just came along after the war on terror and fed them all of this money, and they fed the press all of these lies about Russian bots dividing us. And, we haven't explored that yet. This has very little to do with the Mueller report. In fact, one of the fallbacks for the people who are humiliated by the Mueller report's, I wouldn't say release, but by its conclusion that there was no collusion, is that, Russia did interfere in our elections, so we still have that. And Mueller proved that. And Mueller did prove that a private troll farm in St. Petersburg owned by a hot dog salesman actually did swing votes to Donald Trump that may have been decisive in Michigan because, they were taking out Facebook pages with Buff Bernie coloring book LGBTQ themed pages. I mean, they're still falling back on that, Aaron.
Yeah.
What about that? That narrative is going to be there. It's not going away.
Yeah, I mean,
the disinformation is not going away.
No, it's not. So I have 2 points to say here. One, so New Knowledge was the primary report. There was another report, but New Knowledge was the primary one, and it was cited by everybody. Fueled, headlines for days about how the Senate report shows the extent of the Russian social media attack. And I wrote a piece for The Nation, sort of going through it and looking at what it showed and how actually the number of social media posts by the IRA, only a very small number of them even talked about the election or about the candidates.
Facebook admitted, the VP of Facebook published a report that admitted that the majority of the ads came out after the election.
Oh, of course. Oh, yeah, after the election. Oh, yeah. I mean, the whole thing is like, to even discuss it, it feels silly because it's so stupid. But I want to quote you one thing from the New Knowledge report in case anybody missed this. This is my favorite part of it. So New Knowledge in this section, this is a Senate report. Okay, this has the imprimatur of the U.S. Senate. So they have a section on the Russians' quote asset development, and it says quote recruiting an asset by exploiting a personal vulnerability is a timeless espionage practice. Okay. And the first example they adduce of this timeless espionage practice is this. There's an ad of Jesus comforting a sullen young man, and you see Jesus quoted saying, "Struggling with the addiction to masturbation, reach out to me and we will beat it together." And then it says, "You can't hold hands with God when you are masturbating. Use our hotline if you need help." So according to the official Senate experts on, Russian espionage and Russian interference, this was the top example of the Russians' asset development as part of their sweeping social media campaign that, of course, sober people like Gerald Nadler and Hillary Clinton compared to Pearl Harbor and 9/11. And speaking of Hillary Clinton...
What a bunch of jerk-offs.
And then speaking of Hillary Clinton, in terms of the ads, and this speaks to a major reason why we have Russiagate, is Hillary Clinton was quoted saying, when there was a big uproar about Cambridge Analytica, whether or not the Trump campaign was involved and whether or not the Russians were involved with them, Hillary Clinton said, there are questions about how did the Russians know to target their sophisticated ads to voters in Wisconsin and Michigan.
How did they know? Because she wasn't campaigning there? I don't know.
Well, exactly. So it's like you're going to blame these stupid Russian ads that nobody saw for your failure in the states you didn't campaign in because, according to the book Shattered, Hillary didn't campaign there because her aides told her that the more attention we raise about you there, the worse we'll do because voters reject your message. These were two states that Bernie Sanders won during the primary because the voters there rebelled against against Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama's neoliberal legacy. And of course, in the election, what do we see? They went for Trump because Trump was falsely portraying himself as a working class champion who was going to drain the swamp.
And the Clinton legacy of sending their jobs overseas through NAFTA was fresh in everybody's minds, and she was running on that legacy. She was talking about doing more TPP and so on. And
so her and her cohorts are blaming these stupid ads that nobody saw for their loss. Like, is there a parallel in terms of like self-denial and delusion? There's no other parallel in my lifetime. And that's why I was saying the other day, like, you can't understand this whole thing without like talking about psychology, and I'm not like equipped enough to talk about that yet, but I'd like to look at that one day because it's like it was the biggest outbreak of collective self-delusion that I personally have ever witnessed.
Well, since
Yes.
WMDs in Iraq.